Did you know that establishing a good fitting waistband is an important part of the fitting process for skirts and pants? Think about it. The waistband holds these garments up and secures them in place at a comfortable level. If the waistband is too small, the garment will likely sit too high on the body. If it's too large, the garment will sit too low. In both cases, an ill-fitting waistband will cause fitting issues below it and will ultimately be quite uncomfortable. So today I'll show you how to draft a basic straight waistband using your personal body measurements. I'm Alexandra Morgan from In-House Pattern Studio. I teach experienced sewers and budding pattern makers how to confidently create garments that fit. If you're struggling with fitting your sewing patterns or want to learn how to create your own pattern designs, head over to inhousepatternstudio.com for helpful and inspiring tutorials and skill building courses that will elevate your sewing. In this tutorial, I'll be creating a waistband for my skirt block. If you've joined the skirt block mini class, you'll definitely want to follow along. If you don't yet have a skirt block and you'd like to create one, I'll tell you more about that mini class after the demonstration. Let's get started. Now, before we get started with drafting the waistband, we are going to need some measurements from our pattern. So I have here my basic skirt block, which I've drafted along with you, and I have actually gone through the fitting process and made sure that my dart volumes are exactly what I need and that I do have at least that 1 inch of ease in the waistline of the pattern. You need that 1 inch of ease in the waistline, even though when you're fitting, it's going to feel like you don't, because when you put a waistband on a skirt, it's going to be tighter, and we are going to make the waistband a little bit smaller than the actual waistline of the skirt. Again, this is a matter of just fitting the waistline nice and neatly for the type of waistband that we are going to be creating in this tutorial. So what you're going to need to do is get the back waistline measurement minus any dart volume, and you're going to get the front waistline measurement minus any dart volume to get the two measurements you're going to need to get started with your draft. Now you're going to add all of those measurements together in order to get your total waistline measurement. So you're going to be 8 1/8 of an inch times 2 and 8 5/8 of an inch times 2, and then you're going to add those measurements together to get your entire waistline girth measurement. This particular measurement for my block is 33.5 inches. And as I said, this is about 1 inch larger than my waist circumference, and I'm actually fitting my skirt about 1 inch below my waist because I just find that that's a more comfortable place for me. So that is the measurement I'm going to start off with. So I've recorded my waistline measurement of my pattern here at 33.5 inches. I've also recorded my front waistline measurement, which is 8 5/8, and my back waistline measurement, which is 8 1/8. We're going to do some calculations with those numbers that are going to give us the information we need to draft our waistband for this particular skirt. You will need, of course, to take your own measurements from your own pattern to draft the waistband for your personal fit of your skirt. Okay, so as I said, we are going to use the waistline measurement of our skirt pattern to begin our drafting of our waistband. I'm going to take the circumference of my pattern measurement here of 33.5 at the waistline, and what I'm going to do is subtract 1/2 of an inch for that. Or if you're working in metric, it's 1.3 centimeters would be about the equivalent. Now that's going to give me a measurement of 33 inches for my finished waistband length. So yes, you are right. The finished waistband length is going to be a 1/2 inch smaller than the actual waistline of the skirt. So make sure that you do that calculation. The other thing that we're going to need for the drafting of the waistband is your front waistline measurement, which we recorded here. You're going to subtract 1/8 of an inch from that measurement, or 0.3 centimeters. So I started out with 8 5/8. I'm going to end up with 8.5 inches for my front notch position for the front waistline. My back waistline, I'm going to do a similar thing, 8 1/8. I'm going to minus 1/8 of an inch, or 0.3 centimeters, and I'm going to get a back waistline measurement of 8 inches on my waistband. So you're not changing anything about your skirt pattern at all. These calculations are going to apply to your waistband only. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to determine the width of the waistband, and I highly recommend that you use a waistband width of 1¼ inches. Now, when you do that, you're going to plot this on a piece of paper, and we are going to plot the pattern on a folded piece of paper. So I have some white pattern paper here that's about 5 inches wide, and it's as long as I'm going to need to make my waistband. So we're going to draft the full 33-inch waistband on this particular pattern paper. I fold that pattern in half, and I'm going to measure down from the folded edge 1¼ inch. So I'm just going to plot my 1¼ inch width of the waistband here. So the waistband that we're drafting here is going to have the folded edge on the top edge of the waistband. Okay, so once I have that, I'm now going to determine where I want the opening in my waistband to be. And I'm going to assume that we are going to continue with the center back opening on the waistband. So what I'm going to do now is plot first the seam allowance that you're going to use for sewing the waistband together. And since we've been using 1/2 inch in the skirt draft mini class, I'm going to plot a 1/2 inch seam line position away from the edge of the paper here. Now from there, you're going to plot your back waistline length. Because what we're going to do is we're going to measure along this line, and we're going to create the notches that we need in order to attach the waistband. So from there, I am going to measure 8 inches, because this line right here is going to be considered center back. From center back to the side seam is going to be 8 inches. So I'm going to just make a mark there, and then I am going to just indicate that this is an actual side seam position. So I usually just write SS to tell me that that's going to be the side seam. So from the center back to the side seam is 8 inches on the back of the skirt. Now the next one we're going to plot is the front waistline, because we know that what goes from the side seam to center front is going to be 8½ inches. So I'm going to plot 8½ inches. And this I know is going to be center front. So just drawing a perpendicular line from the folded edge there, and I can mark this as my center front line. I can continue on because I also need to plot the other side of the front pattern. So I'm going to go from center front to the next side seam, which is going to be another 8½ inches. Now, you of course are using your own measurements here, because this drafting that I'm doing is specifically for my skirt pattern, so you want to make sure that you are plotting the right measurements for you. So then I'm going to go from center front to side seam, which is going to be the 8½ inches, which is again is the other side of my front waistline. And now, since I'm going to continue from side seam to center back again, I'm going to plot the back waistline at another 8 inches. And this is going to indicate center back. Now we all know that when you have a zipper opening at the back, you need an extension on the waistband in order to hold the button or the hook and eye or some sort of closure that's going to keep that waistband closed. So we're going to plot another segment that is 1 inch wide, and this is going to be the extension. So from center back here to this line here is what we call the button extension. And then from there, I'm going to plot a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now, once you've plotted out all of the lengths that you need that are corresponding to your front and back waistline lengths, you want to just double check to make sure that your measurement is going to be equivalent to your finished waistband length. So make sure that you do go ahead and double check, make sure that you've got that 33-inch finished measurement from center back to center back. So that is really, really important. Do not include, of course, the seam allowances or your extension, because you have not calculated that into these measurements. Now, once you have the correct waistband length and you've got all the positions of where your notches are going to land, you can add your seam allowance at the bottom edge of the waistband. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for my draft. So what we've done here is drafted one side of the waistband, because you'll know that we had that fold line there. So we have to transfer the information to the other side so that we have our full waistband width. So what we're going to do is just simply make the same markings on the other side. And I like to do this with a tracing wheel. So we have a tracing wheel here, and all I need to do now is to make my markings here. I like to mark through the seam lines so that I don't get confused as to what the seam line is and what the cut line is. So you can see here, I'm just going to make little markings on each of these segments, making sure that everything is remaining flat. That's my side seam position. And I might want to mark where the seam line is here. I'm going to do the center front position here, and again the seam line, the side seam position, and then of course the seam line here of where it joins the skirt. And I'm going to do the center back position here and the seam line here. I can even go on and do the position of the extension here. Now when I have those markings marked, I can easily flip it over and I can see them on the other side. You may not be able to see them, but you'll see that there are perforations on your paper. You can also use your ruler again to plot out that 1 1/4 inch, using those as your guideline as well. Now you'll notice on this side I have not included seam allowances yet, because what I want to do is just clean up and make sure everything is nice and square and everything makes sense. So I've got my 1/2 inch seam allowance here. I'm going to join that point to the side seam position here, just to show you that. Center front is here, and so on. And then the last thing I need to do is just add my 1/2 inch seam allowance on the other side of my waistband here. Okay, so now we have our waistband all drafted. I'm going to cut it out, and then we're going to notch out the position so that we know exactly where this waistband is going to be placed. So we are going to notch the fold line of the waistband. We're also going to notch the seam allowance and the extension point here. But since we need to do both sides, it's easiest if you fold that waistband in half again, and then we can actually just notch through both layers of the paper. So I'm going to notch the seam allowance here on the extension side and then indicate center back. The side seam is going to be notched here, the center front here, the side seam once again here, and then the center back position here, and of course the other side of the fold line here. So when you do that, you're going to notice here when you fold the pattern on the center front, that one side is going to be longer than the other by that 1 inch. And that's because you need that extension in order to set a button or a hook or something in order to actually close the waistband. So don't forget to add that extension, because you will miss it if you don't have it. There you have it. You now know how to create a basic waistband for any skirt, shorts, or pants that sits at or near the natural waistline. If you're interested in creating your own made-to-measure skirt block, join the Skirt Block mini class. It's absolutely free. When you sign up for the class, you'll receive the drafting instructions for a woven skirt block and a series of emails that will give you step-by-step guidance in creating a custom-sized skirt pattern using your personal body measurements. If you're tired of constantly making the same fitting adjustments to commercially sewn patterns, fed up with compromising on pattern styles, and want to begin creating your own patterns that fit, the Skirt Block mini class is for you. I'll leave a link for you somewhere on this page. So tell me, did you learn something new by watching this video? If you're watching on YouTube, like, subscribe, and share your aha moment in the comments. If you know someone who might benefit from seeing this video, share the link and invite them to learn along with you. I'll chat with you soon. Bye for now.